The problem is you worry about ever leaving somebody out, because that's the embarrassing part, you know.
Right. Well, khaki. I hadn't even thought about khaki.
I remember one time it really influenced me, and I was in Columbia and had just come out of Clive Davis's office, and we were going to go to lunch. And somebody had an artist or something had put together all of the artists on the Columbia label, little post thumb stamp faces of all these people. And we were just standing there in the hall, and Clive looked over at this picture. I don't remember how many, probably 200 artists or something like that. And he says, I worry about the day if I ever forget one of those names. And I'm like, oh. I mean, I have trouble remembering like 20 names, and here he's talking about 200. So it's amazing what the president of a big major record company goes through. You know, I've never looked at it like that before. That's a lot of artists. It really is a lot of artists.
Well, and you have 17 quality artists.
Well, we tried to keep it, I guess, on the open end.
Let's talk about some of the artists that were on the label at that time.
Well, in the starting days, I think probably one of the best building blocks that Stax Records had was probably Rufus Thomas, Rufus and Carla Thomas, father-daughter. And they did a record on them called "'Cause I Love You" that did pretty well, I think. It did enough, at least what I remember. I didn't play on that particular record, but I was around when it was recorded. And what I remember as the stories went down, that enough interest was started, you know, through the South and on radio and so forth, that really gave Atlantic Records, Jerry Wexler and them, an interest into what we were doing down here. And from that led to Carla Thomas's Gee Whiz, and to the song on the group that I had in high school, the Marquis, called Last Night. And it was just sort of a, like I said earlier, a snowballing effect of, you know, the more successful you were, the more opportunity you had, and the more chances at doing certain things. And obviously there were a lot of failures. You know, we try to remember all the good times. And every now and then somebody mentioned to me about, wow, Cropper, you know, wrote all these great songs and that sort of stuff. And when I look back, I said, well, you know, I probably had maybe 18 top 10 songs, you know. But I wrote probably 300, 400, 500 songs, so we don't talk about the failures too often.
What was it like working with Booker T?
Oh, well, I think Booker, along with what it was like working at Stax, when we used to go there, I tell people this all the time without really making it up, it was sort of like going to church every day. You get up in the morning, you take a shower, you get in the car, and I mean, the energy started hitting you before you got there. And we sort of had a standing rule of we wanted to start each day around 11 o'clock. And you know how hard it is for musicians to get up. And people like Al Jackson and Booker T sometimes, I mean, they were playing some of these clubs that didn't close till 2:30 or 3 in the morning. You know, they were playing that late shift. And for them to go home and just try to catch a few hours sleep and then try to be back at the studio saying, hey, I'm ready to work at 11 was a little difficult sometimes. But I think the whole atmosphere of the guys, like the Memphis Horns and people like that, and the rhythm section, it was really like going to church. It was just this high energy level, and all the guys were waiting for the next one. You know, the thing that sticks in my mind the most is when Otis was going to come to town. I mean, the week before Otis came, that whole building was just vibrating. It was amazing. Everybody couldn't wait. So, Otis is coming in next week. Wow, you know, because in those days we were churning them out pretty good. Sometimes we were working with 2, 3 artists a week, and trying to cut 3 or 4, 5 songs a day sometimes, and you know, like on a double shift sort of a situation, and because of the demand. And we were trying to do it with all of this same group, you know, like with 7 guys in a room playing. And there were a lot of artists like that, a lot of energy kind of things. It was always fun when Eddie Floyd came in, you know, to work again and stuff like that. And we had some good moments with some outside people, like when Wilson Pickett came down. We did some good things on him. So. There was always kind of some interesting, fun things going on at Stax, even though it was business too.
Where did the title Green Onions come
from? Well, Green Onions. I think the original title we had, the story about that whole song is too long to tell because I'm about to run out of breath. We had cut this sort of blues instrumental, and Jim Stewart thought it was good enough to maybe give it a shot at a record. And he said, gosh, he said, you guys, he said, you know, this is really good. He said, have you got anything that you can put on, the, you know, as a B-side? So Booker and I said, well, we've been working on this little riff, and Booker had this little riff on the organ that he'd been playing, and we'd kind of piddle around with it off and on for a couple of weeks. I mean, we're not really spending any time on it. We said, we got this little riff, and he said, well, let's hear it. So we did the little thing, and the guys worked it up, and Jim said, well, it's pretty good if we just take the guitar thing in the middle and put it on the front and do an instrumental and so forth, and that's what we did. So the guitar thing in the middle wound up to be the intro, and then we did the 2 verses, and I did a solo, and Booker did the thing out, and we went with it. And that happened to turn out to be the song Green Onions. But when we went in to listen back, he said, well, we really got something here. He said, we need to title these things. He said, what is the funkiest, you know, down, grittiest, you know, thing you can think of? And Louis Steinberg, I was sitting there and he says, onions. He said, onions are about the stinkingest, funkiest thing I can think of. So I said, onions, I don't know. And we hashed it around for a minute, and then somebody, I don't know if it was Booker or Al Jackson or who came up with it. It could have been me, could have been anyone else. I really don't remember. But somebody said, well, let's clean it up and call it green onions, you know, because green onions are pretty healthy too, you know, they're pretty stinky. And as it went, by the time the record came out, we wound up flipping the sides. So the blues ballad wound up to be the B-side, and the dance one wound up to be what we now know to be as Green Onions.
Was it your first big hit?
On the label or as a... No. I think, well, I guess Green Onions was the first actual million seller, if I remember correctly, for Stax. We had, like I said earlier, we had a record called Last Night, which was, I don't know I don't know if it ever went to #1 on Billboard, but it went to like 2 or 3. And then Green Onions was the first song that went, I think it went #1 across the board on most of the trade magazines at that time.
Why'd you move to L.A.? Why'd you leave Memphis, Steve?
Oh, I don't know. I think I was basically just in search for something different, I think. I left Stax for just certain reasons. You know, I really can't get into why I left there or whatever. I just wasn't comfortable there anymore. I'd been there for 10 years, and all of a sudden it just didn't seem, you know, the old thing wasn't there anymore for some reason. And I made a decision to leave. It was very difficult to leave. And I stayed here for a while and got with another guy and started a label, you know, with another recording studio and so forth. And we tried that for a while. We put a lot of energy into it and so forth. And I don't know, I was a little frustrated, I think. I wasn't really tired of what I was doing. I really did want to stretch out. I definitely wasn't tired of what I was doing. I mean, R&B will always be my life till the end. But we tried to mix it up a little bit and do some songs that were a little more pop, you know, oriented. And with moderate success, and it just wasn't enough to hold things together, you know. And I really just didn't feel like, I don't know, staying and trying something new here again. And I just thought it was time for me to go somewhere else. There's a possibility I may come back. I don't know, you know. I've always had that in the back of my mind. And another thing I've always predicted, that Memphis will always survive itself in the music industry. It always has. It always cycles around somehow. We never know when or where. It's sort of like, how can you predict when a volcano is going to erupt? But it's, I think, on its way back now. I think right here, 85 now, going into 86, I think we're going to see a major upswing of Memphis talent again, Memphis songs, Memphis music. You know, and I'm very supportive of that whole situation.
Is there, or was there ever a Memphis sound, particularly?
Well, I guess there was. When you say a Memphis sound, that's what it got pegged with, I guess. It was a certain sound of music, certain style of music that people identified. Well, you know, the buying public also as well. But I think it was mainly what disc jockeys referred to. I mean, they're sitting there all day long spinning, you know, songs and records from all over the world. And I mean, without even listening, they could hear 2 bars or 4 bars of a song and they say, wow, that was cut in Memphis. The same as they could with a Detroit record and so forth like that. So I guess for a while, yeah, we had a Memphis sound. A lot of people have asked through the years, what is the Memphis sound? And God only knows what the Memphis Sound was. I mean, the Memphis Sound was the result of a lot of hard-working people that really had just a devout love for this business. The thrill of having a song recorded and having it played on the radio and having people go out and buy it, you know. It was just an inner love. It really wasn't the money at all, you know. Success, obviously, I mean, that just builds upon itself. But it was just the, you know, just the heart and soul of a lot of dedicated people that created the Memphis Sound.
Do you think it has a lot to do with having it come from musicians that had more emotion than training?
Well, I think so. I think it was a reaching out of people wanting to express themselves. I think you find that true in a lot of areas where a musician is highly trained, that has really studied his craft, that's really researched his music, you know, and really knows what he's doing, winds up sometimes finding it very difficult to express himself. He's got all these tools, and it's like, wow, you know. And I think it's easier to express yourself, you know, when you got a drum and a stick, you know. You got 2 things to bang on instead of 100 things to bang on. And I think that reaching out for, you know, to express yourself, that's what they call art. You know, to some people, it's an art form. And I think Memphis was very fortunate to have that caliber of people running around this town wanting more than anything to express themselves. I think that's why so many great artists came out of Memphis, Tennessee. The thing, when you say artists, that's who we know as the individual who sang the song and did it. I think they were also fortunate to have such great people on the underground pushing them and really backing them, not using them, you know. That's happened in a lot of areas too, where certain people in positions and in power can influence, and they were actually using people a lot of times. You know, that's some of the bitter part of the business. In Memphis, it didn't happen so often. I mean, there was such a love, it was such a family with everybody. I mean, everybody cheers when another guy has a hit record, you know. They're not really jealous. They're just proud, you know, as though they did it themselves. So.
That's rare.
Yes, it is rare.
I think that it would be very difficult. Do you think that it's more difficult for kids starting out today? It seems like you guys had a lot of time to play and make mistakes and go on. It seems like today kids are faced with, the first thing they're faced with is the video. And it doesn't seem to me like they have that much opportunity to make mistakes and grow.
Well, that's very true. You know, I'm sure a lot of times in some of the sessions we did, if the camera had been rolling, we may have never made it, you know, I don't know. It is very difficult. There's a whole new era coming up. I mean, the kids out there are obviously being influenced by what they see on the screen and not necessarily what they hear. It also creates a lot of difficulty in a lot of areas. It's a new ball game out there. In terms of, is it harder today for up-and-coming new talents to make it? Based on the information that we have and whatever, I mean, there's more people, so there's obviously more to pick and choose from. In terms of, I think you mentioned something about a chance to make more mistakes or whatever. The kids today have more information to pick from. I mean, a lot of the information we had to make up because it wasn't available. I mean, it took forever before you hardly got liner notes on the back of an album, let alone the lyrics and who did it and who played on it and what studio and who engineered it and all that sort of stuff. It just wasn't available in the days that we came up. So in terms of actually making it, it's like anything else. If you got the will, you know, and the desire to do it, there ain't nothing going to stop you. And that's how, you know, talent is made.
Who are you listening to today? Who's making good music?
Oh boy. That's really hard to say. There are so many good records out there, good musicians. There's so much talent running around. I mean, there's some of the new stuff that's coming out of England and some of the new stuff that's coming out of America, I think is phenomenal. I think it's just advanced itself right out there. It's amazing, you know. I don't have anything particular in mind that I could pick from. On the other hand, there are people out there that take, I think, a lot of liberties and maybe sometimes too much. I think they forget that there are roots in this business. You know, there was a starting point. There, you know, There are no rules in this business, but I think, you know, there are certain guidelines that holds the industry together somehow. It's sort of like the earth. The industry sort of takes care of itself. And it's always going to be up and down. You know, one minute everybody panics, oh my God, this is it, you know, nothing's selling, and the next minute it's so much happening that, you know. I don't envy, you know, the record companies today that have to sit down and design a budget to where they have to come up from anywhere from $75,000 to $100,000 to do a video, when, you know, 25 years ago it was decided upon as whether they would spend anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 to make an album. I mean, that's come a long way. So there's a lot of pressure out there on the guys that, you know, call the shots on who gets the big bucks and who doesn't. You know, it's a different business, but it's still the record business.
What's Steve Cropper doing in 1985, 86?
Oh, kind of having a ball, you know. I think I made a major decision for my career, at least to get back to my roots. I made a decision about 1.5 years ago to really spend some time to get back to writing, because I really think that's what I do best. You had mentioned earlier about, you know, what comes first, the chicken or the egg. You know, is it the guitar, is it the writing, is it whatever? I really think, for me, I think it's the writing. And my own feelings, I'm not sterile by any means. I got into doing a lot of production after you know, when I left Stax back in the early 70s. I had a lot of opportunity to work with a lot of artists, to produce a lot of records, and it really took a lot of my time. And I almost got out of the writing business, except on a rare occasion when I would chip in and help write this or write that. And now it's a little bit different. I've sort of stopped a lot of the production, sort of like I say, the mass production, doing 4 or 5 albums a year, to writing songs, and songs that I believe in and having fun with. And so far I'm very happy with what's been going on. You got it?
It was pretty painless, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
That's right. Dr. Ashoff,
And we were just standing there in the hall, and Clive looked over at this picture. I don't remember how many, probably 200 artists or something like that. And he says, I worry about the day if I ever forget one of those names. And I'm like, oh. I mean, I have trouble remembering like 20 names, and here he's talking about 200. So it's amazing what the president of a big major record company goes through. You know, I've never looked at it like that before. That's a lot of artists. It really is a lot of artists.
Well, and you have 17 quality artists.
The problem is you worry about ever leaving somebody out, because that's the embarrassing part, you know.
Right. Well, khaki, I hadn't even thought about khaki.
I remember one time it really influenced me, and I was in Columbia and had just come out of Clive Davis's office, and we were going to go to lunch. And somebody had an artist or something had put together all of the artists on the Columbia label, little post thumb stamp faces of all these people around when it was recorded. And what I remember as the stories went down, that enough interest was started, you know, through the South and on radio and so forth, that really gave Atlantic Records, Jerry Wexler and them, an interest into what we were doing down here. And from that led to Carla Thomas's Gee Whiz, and to the song on the group that I had in high school, the Marquis, called Last Night. And it was just sort of a, like I said earlier, a snowballing effect of, you know, the more successful you were, the more opportunity you had, and the more chances at doing certain things. And obviously there were a lot of failures. You know, we try to remember all the good times. And every now and then somebody mentioned to me about, wow, Cropper, you know, wrote all these great songs and that sort of stuff. And when I look back, I said, well, you know, I probably had maybe 18 top 10 songs, you know. But I wrote probably 300, 400, 500 songs, so we don't talk about the failures too often.
What was it like working with Booker T?
Oh, well, we tried to keep it, I guess, on the up and up.
Let's talk about some of the artists that were on the label at that time.
Well, in the starting days, I think probably one of the best building blocks that Stax Records had was probably Rufus Thomas, Rufus and Carla Thomas, father-daughter. And they did a record on them called 'Cause I Love You that did pretty well, I think. It did enough, at least what I remember. I didn't play on that particular record, but I was